Welcome to Bet Safe. You're watching our World Championship preview for 2017. We're talking F1. I'm Pete Colley. This is Johnny Herbert. Let's talk Melbourne. First of all, what can we expect from the circuit, Johnny?
A great challenge for the drivers. It's always been a very sort of difficult one to get right. It's really strange. There's high downforce. It's a great circuit to drive. What I'm looking forward to is because of these new cars with the fat tyres and the more downforce and the late braking, the one corner that always seems to catch everybody out is the first one. It's quite bumpy as you go in, as you turn into the right-hander of turn one before you go on the exit turn two. Now the braking distance is obviously going to be that much shorter. Now is that going to move them into an issue where those bumps are going to become more of a problem for them? So that's where the challenge of the driver and the setup of the car compromise. Maybe a compromise is going to have to come into play just because of those braking distances have gone down. Then you go to turn 10, the quick left-right flick on towards the back straight. Very, very difficult corner for a driver because everything happens so quickly. When you turn in, you're literally having to turn right before you go on the exit because everything's just so quick. So now we're going to be travelling that much faster in these new cars. That turn-in is going to have to happen that much quicker, but it's going to happen because they've got that much grip at the same time. So the change of direction is going to probably look pretty super special this time around. And then, of course, for the rest of the circuit, going through turn 3, very similar, underneath the trees, a little bit difficult with the tyres because you've got the sun on one side and then the shade of the trees on the other side. So the tyres just change a little bit in temperature, becomes a little bit more unstable, but they've got more grip and they're going to be braking that much later, and they've got those fatter tyres to turn it in to the apex of the corner itself and then going through the left-hander of turn 5. So there's a lot of great little challenges that are going to come our way, and of course the last one that always looks good on if you're in the pit lane, if you're in the grandstand opposite or on TV, is the last turn. It's a great little sort of right-hander, a little bit off camber as you go over the top of a tiny little brow. But of course they're going to probably have that much more grip, but that much more speed. Are they going to be going flat out round it, which they were very, very close to doing in the last couple of seasons? I think there's a chance of that. But to do that, you're probably going to have to run very, very wide as well. So the judgment is going to really have to come into play at the same time. So a great challenge for the engineers we set up, but a great challenge for the drivers as well.
What about the heat on the circuit? How much is that going to play a part, do you think?
Well, we are talking of Melbourne, and we are talking of 4 seasons can come into play as well, which have happened in the past. We've had sort of wet ones, we have had cool ones, we have had hot ones at the same time. We haven't had the snow, I don't believe.
No, I don't think so.
Fourth one has never come in, but you never know what might happen there. So yes, again, that will all go down there because the teams will be sort of doing their simulator work in probably the conditions they expect to have when they get to Melbourne itself. But because it changes so quickly, it doesn't always mean the work that you've done is actually going to be the correct scenario because everything's going to be different. So the tyres are going to be really a difficult thing to get in the correct working window. And we always know how small the working window was in the last couple of seasons. They predict that it's going to be a slightly bigger one. So that's going to sort of help the drivers get the tyre up to temperature if you're talking about qualifying or even in the race at the same time. Degradation doesn't seem to be such a big problem. If it's hotter, is that going to cause a few more problems because the cars have got that little bit more downforce and grip at the same time to generate more tyre temperature at the same time? So there's a lot of sort of slightly unknowns. You know, Barcelona's very good because where they do all their testing. It's got a lot of quick corners, similar to sort of turn 10, where you're going to get that load in where you generate all that tyre temperature. So they have a bit of an idea, but it's just the unknown of what you're going to actually have when you get to Melbourne itself. So it's being able to react to whatever Melbourne and Australia throws at it. So that's great because I think that unpredictability comes in, and who knows, it might help some of those guys a bit further back.
Qualifying wise, any surprise packages to get to Q3?
The one that I still don't really know where they are at the moment. There's a lot of good vibes within the team. The performances looked pretty okay at the first part of the test. A little bit went off towards the end. Is Renault. Now, Renault could be that sort of surprise. You know, they're on this sort of regrouping and rebuilding at the moment. So that would be, I think, a great Q3 surprise. is them just popping in there. If it could be the Brit, that'd be great. Joey and Palmer.
Are we going to see any upgrades, you think, to the cars from so far what we've seen in testing?
You'll see different cars probably in the pit lane on Thursday. You'll probably see a similar car on Friday. And knowing Australia, as I've known, and I always remember in the past, Red Bull, the amount of stuff that comes in, like on a Friday night for the Saturday, is immense. Now, it won't be just Red Bull, it will be everybody else down the paddock. And I think that's where, whatever they start with, is probably not necessarily what they're going to finish with when they're on either in qualifying, which is obviously where that's your final choice of setup and car situations for the Sunday race. That's where there's going to be the shift. So I think overnight, from Friday to Saturday, we're going to see those little fine details come into play. And who knows who's going to get the right sort of package together for that Saturday, because it may be completely different from what we see on Friday. So that's great, because again, it's a little bit of an unknown at the same time. There's going to be a massive amount of work going on before the race, but actually just to the run-up probably on Friday and Saturday as well. So it's going to be brilliant to see.
Are McLaren's problems over with, do we think?
Oh, I think they've only just started, to be perfectly honest. It's one of those scenarios, isn't it? We had the success that they've had for many, many decades now. We have a two-time world champion who's in a car that I think is frustrating him, definitely been frustrating him last year, and all the comments that we hear over the radio as well. It's a frustrated driver at the same time. It's very unfair in many regards that he's in that situation. The Honda reliability issues are huge as well, because this is not just an evolution of last year's Honda. It's a completely brand spanking new principle that they put into place. Gone a little bit down the Mercedes route with how sort of all the packaging of the engine has gone. And at the moment, it looks terrible. They were 20k slower down the straight than anybody else. The reliability was, to say one word, shocking. So they're going to Melbourne completely unprepared. And they've got probably a driver, as in Fernando Alonso, who's going to be probably so worried about the situation that he's in at the present time. But then on the flip side of that, you've got Stoffel van Dorn, the man who got their first points last year in 2016. It's his first full season in Formula One. He's going to be hungry. He's probably not going to be really worried where he is on the grid, because he's want to go out there to do the best job that he possibly can, and also beat his teammate, the two-time world champion. So Stoffel's in probably a better mental situation, but as a whole package, sadly, they must be spitting bullets, because there is just no sign of the issues they had last year going away. It looks worse. It looks much, much worse. You know, there's even rumours that they're talking to Mercedes-Benz for an engine at the same time. Wow, we haven't got to Melbourne yet. So it's pretty unbelievable and quite shocking that McLaren have got into this horrible situation. It's that horrible downfall we saw with Williams in many regards, where they were, a team that have historically done so well, and then they're on this downward spiral, and it's been very hard for them to get out. And now we've seen McLaren, the great McLaren, Ron Dennis, and everything that Ron has achieved with McLaren, and the world championships of constructors and drivers that they've had. And yet, it's still going down. It's not leveling. It's still going down. Unbelievable. It's going to be a hard watch for them, to be honest. But let's hope. They've been very good in the past of fixing problems. Their development in the past has been brilliant. This year, as I said, may be a better time for them, because it's a bit more free to be able to do that on the car side. But of course, you need to have the whole power unit working for you at the same time. So a bit of a tough one for them.
Back to Melbourne. Alonso, Hamilton, Raikkonen, Vettel, all former winners here. But then the upstarts. You've got, Ricciardo, Bottas, we've mentioned, Verstappen. Right. Is it going to be an old head experience, been here, seen it, done it, or is it going to be being pushed by one of these youngsters?
I'd normally say the experience, If you're a world champion or a race winner, that's always a good thing. But I'm not sure. I don't think the experience that we know Sebastian 4 times, Kimi doing the 1, and then Lewis with his 3. It's something that a youngster like Max Verstappen and the youngster-ish Daniel Ricciardo, they are so hungry for this. So those guys at the front who have got all that experience and got those world championships, I've got to be very, very careful not to sort of just expect everything because I've got more experience. I'm going to sort of start here in Australia much, much stronger, because those guys are going to be so hungry for it, so hungry for it. And then you've got Valtteri Bottas, who hasn't won a race, but he is going to want to win his first race at the same time. So he's going to be sort of that threat for Hamilton, let's say, or whoever is at that sharp end of the grid at the same time. So you've got a lovely mix of that wealth of experience, but they can't rely on it because you know those youngsters are going to be there hunting you down. And that's where it's going to become really interesting. That's where sort of the mind games are going to start to come into play as well, team to team, but actually in the teams themselves and from one side of the garage to the other as well. It's going to be great to see how that dynamic turns out.
Let's look at the bet-safe odds then for Melbourne. We've got Hamilton 6-5, Vettel 7-2, Bottas 5-1, Raikkonen 8, Verstappen 19-2, Ricciardo 19-2.
Wow.
What's jumping out at you there?
Well, again, Kimi.
Yeah.
Kimi, it has to be just because of what we've discussed about the testing and how he's happy with the car. Those two ingredients are more than enough for him to be a major threat. And Sebastian, I have to say as well, is something that I'm not surprised he's sort of 7-2 because of he's always been sort of good around Melbourne. He was good there last year. I presume he's going to be exactly the same situation. He's going to be at that sharp edge. But you've got to say Kimi is just alive again. It's the Kimster that we know from years ago. He's got the hunger, and that hunger is very important. It doesn't matter what sport you do, if it's golf or tennis, but especially in Formula One. If that brain is in the right place, then you can sort of just turn up and do the job without even thinking about it. Generally what Kimi does, to be perfectly frank, but it's just something I think he's in a great position because of the way Ferrari love him. We all love him. I think he loves himself when it comes to Melbourne, to be honest. I think he loves himself because I think he's got a chance. He's got a good chance.
Can I ask you then to put more than your reputation on the line here and give us a treble for the pole position, fastest race lap winner? Right.
Well, pole position, I'm going to have to go for Lewis Hamilton. I think just on what we've seen in the last couple of races of last season, his performances in the tests, and what he's been able to achieve in Melbourne before. Maybe not quite as much as he probably should have done, but I just think he's probably in the right place at the moment to get the pole position. When it comes down to fastest lap, I think that'd be slightly different because the scenario always does slightly shift and how a car sort of performs and how you can drive with the car, with the tyres, and even sometimes with the modes that you have on the engine itself. I think I've got to go down to Sebastian, because I think Sebastian is, as I said, he's in the right era for these types of cars for him to sort of come alive. But then if you go down to the winner itself, I'm going to say Kimi. I honestly think Kimi just has the right aura about him at this present time may not be there quite when it needs to be, when it's in the pole position. It could be second, but it'll probably be on the second row at worst. Not a bad place to be. But then I do it in his racecraft. He has probably the best spatial awareness of what's going on around him when he's in the race car in a race situation. So if there's someone coming up needing rubbing wheels with him, he knows that, and he will play to give himself the room to be able to sort of capitalise on maybe the exit of the next corner, for example. Very good at a race situation. And the way the setup of the circuit is in Melbourne, it's very hard to overtake, for one. But I think he's always able to place himself in a race situation, wheel-to-wheel battle, or if it comes down to just doing the right pace, to maybe just before a pit stop, just do that little extra sort of speed to give him a chance to get ahead once those pit stops have happened. That's where he's normally been very, very good. And I just think, yeah, for the race, I think Kimi is a big threat.
Remember where you heard it, betsafe.com. Johnny, thanks for joining us. Johnny and I have now got to get onto a champagne-fueled Learjet to Melbourne, have we not? You did say that we were, didn't you?
Yes,
yeah.
I did.
You can check out all the latest odds on betsafe.com, and remember, you've got to be in it to win it.